our wonderful panel. Our wonderful panel for a panel that almost didn't happen. Good morning, all. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Let's do a sort of a round so that everybody can see who we've got. We are here, obviously, to discuss the World Economic Forum. It's an international organization based in Switzerland, founded in 1971 by German economist Klaus Schwab. The WEF views its mission as improving the state of the world by engaging business, political, academic, and other leaders of society to shape global, regional, and industry agendas. Well, that sounds all very interesting, doesn't it? And our panel here this morning is, I don't know if I'm going to get this in the right order or not, but hey, I'll give it my best shot. We've got Dr. Kat Lindley, who is on the steering committee of the World Council for Health and also the Global COVID Summit Group. We've also got, let me see if I can see this, we've also got Alasdair Macleod from GoldMoney, who will be here to discuss WEF and finance with us. We also have David Nolan, founder of Stop Common Pass. He'll be here to talk about digital IDs and such like. And we have Matt Gubba, who has the acknowledgement of actually inspiring this panel. And it was due to Matt and his phenomenal tweet. Matt is, and in case you don't know, he's joined us on Rise before. He's a CEO at BizBritain. He's a financier of startups. And Matt, we're going to kick off with you, Matt. And you tweeted on July the 29th, I'm seriously considering setting up a not-for-profit organization to oppose the WEF. Key objectives would be lobbying against their 2030 agenda and doing everything possible to torpedo the Great Reset. Please retweet if you'd support this. And to date, there is over 26,000 likes on there. Clearly, a volume of support. Well done, Matt. But it made me think, wait, the WEF is so influential in every parliament, and yet the mass majority don't actually know about it. It's not something that's discussed openly on mainstream media. So we're going to do it here and now. So Matt, open up for us. Why did you do that tweet?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me back, Sonia, and happy birthday.
Thank you.
So yeah, like a lot of people out there, I've become increasingly, I guess, alarmed over the last couple of years throughout, seeing what's happened with the kind of NGOs kind of rolling onto the scene and trying to impose authoritarian kind of international restrictions on everyone, and seeing how some of their more extremist, I'll call them extremist ideologies, are being adopted by Western governments kind of in lockstep all around the world. And you've got to look at it as, this organization is a private organization that's accountable to no public, no government, no one other than themselves and their financial backers, which, who are invariably large corporates, banks, investment funds. So not the everyday people out there, like you and I and your listeners. So these people don't have our best interests at heart. And the thing that's really disturbing is that firstly, as you say, that there's not more awareness, but the huge level of influence that these guys have over very powerful governments all across the world, the West, the US, the UK, governments all around Europe, and that largely comes from the fact that they've spent the last few decades effectively grooming people to become world leaders, and as Klaus Schwab likes to say, he's penetrated cabinets around the world with the kind of the political equivalent of sleeper agents who are just kind of sat there waiting to impose the will of the World Economic Forum. As we've seen throughout the kind of coronavirus madness, we've seen world leaders around from every nation chanting that their slogan, the build back better, and I'm sure you've probably seen a video that's doing around on social media, and it's very creepy, to say the least. And they kind of have these extremist agendas, and they do all these things under the guise of making the world fairer and trying to save the planet, save the environment, all this stuff. But really, when you track it all back, what it comes down to is they're trying to create an insurmountable wealth divide between them and the rest of us. They talk about fairness, but what they actually mean is they want to drag down all the first world middle classes to this kind of level, the poverty level of the third world. Well, they kind of maintain their private jets, and we all live in micro homes and eat bugs.
Right.
So unless unless everyone wants to be eating bugs and living in micro homes and living the world through the internet, then we need to stop them. It's my view.
The Great Reset, which still people say, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. I mean, Klaus Schwab wrote a book about it. Can you tell us about the Great Reset, Matt?
Well, the Great Reset is kind of it's Klaus's kind of vision for the world, isn't it? It's his I guess the core of his ideology, where he wants to knock everything down. So he wants to kind of reset everything from the way that we interact as a society, so our social values. He wants to reset the balance of power in the world across nations. He effectively wants to kind of burn everything down and start again, doesn't he? But build a world which, in my view, is kind of like neo-feudalism, isn't it? It's like taking us back to the Middle Ages, where you've got these ultra powerful people at the top, and then everyone else who are incapable of doing anything to stop them. And they, like I said a moment ago, they're kind of doing it under the guise of, you know, making things fairer and trying to save the environment. But really, in my view, that's the real agenda.
And we can't forget how influential their supporters are, right? We have pop stars, including Bono. We have the royal family. We have Bill Gates, who's a major influencer at WEF. And what's interesting, of course, is that the two people vying to be the next Prime Minister, both Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, both WEF people. And as you say, WEF is proudly penetrating cabinets all around the world, from Trudeau in Canada and Macron in France to Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London. So this is an extraordinary degree of influence, but it is, as you say, all dressed up as this is about improving society. Do you think we're taking it all wrong, Matt?
Well, do I think we're taking it wrong? No, definitely not. I think they're very good at convincing people that we're taking it wrong, but I definitely don't think we're taking it wrong. You know, ultimately, you've got to look at the background of who Klaus Schwab is, who his family is, where he grew up, in terms of, you know, effectively in Nazi Germany, with his father running a Ravensbrück women's camp, managing director of one of the major contractors for the Nazi Party. I don't personally think that someone who is altruistic and has our best minds in heart would keep all of that stuff. You know, if that was me, I would be renouncing my father. I'd be renouncing everything, you know, in my background, and he's very quiet on all of that. And there's a lot of work going out there to kind of suppress all of that.
I hear you. Sean, you were thrilled with Matt's tweet. You wanted to get completely behind it. What was your response when you saw it?
I take my hat off to you, and it's just how much the tweet grew as well. And I just thought, there's so many people behind this. Like, first of all, I think the World Economic Forum should all be in court for crimes against humanity. I feel that with what's going on with BRICS, which is, you know, this new kind of connection of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, it feels like there is some sort of move now to actually challenge this new world order, and it's coming from these countries that are kind of coming together. But, you know, it's still, I'm still 50-50 with people like Putin, because we've even known that he was from the World Economic Forum and he's been mentioned by Schwab. But at the same time, is he just playing a role, or is he actually trying to stand in the way of this Western? Because obviously the West's lead on the world has dropped. It's gone.
Yes.
And the only way to keep that power is through the WEF and through, you know, them technically taking over in this one world government concept, which I do believe they've pushed a bit too far. And this week, I think Putin did another speech, and he's done another kind of backing with China. But then again, it's just like there's so much going on. Like I can't stand with China because what they do to the Uyghur Muslims. But if they're going to be some sort of last wall in stopping Klaus Schwab,
gosh, that would be interesting.
It would, wouldn't it? And
it certainly would. It would. I mean, it's difficult to know what's what, but that's the whole point of us gathering together today. Aim is to try and bring some illumination to the madness. So with that said, I'd like to next go to Dr. Kat Lindley. Thank you for joining us this morning, Kat, from Texas. Some ludicrous hour there at this moment in time, but you are very much appreciated. Kat, a central plank of what's going on at WEF is to do with our health and our food. Would you give us some, idea of where you're coming from on that and what you've observed?
I actually did a lot of homework this weekend, and I signed up for WF to learn more because they hide everything behind the wall. And we do all this with the WHO, One World, One Health. I don't know how many realize that Gavi Foundation actually is started from WEF initiative, and the Gavi Foundation is one of the biggest private donors to WHO. Another initiative that came from WEF is Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, and that's the group that was behind the COVID-19 vaccine and phase 1 trials. To give you an idea, everyone knows that all the governments are tied to WEF and WHO, but for example, Jane Holton, who is the chair of CPES, which is the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness, she was the advisor to Australian Prime Minister on vaccines. So their tentacles are everywhere. And, they all say this is under the guise of climate change and things like that. And that's where they started introducing this idea of substituting protein, meat protein for insect protein, because that's so much better for us. And it's interesting to see that food supply factories in the United States and all over the world, there's accidents that are happening. We're having baby formula shortage. Who's ever heard of having baby formula shortage?
Right.
So all these things like that, they tie to WEF, to WHO, to all these foundation. And I believe Mr. Macleod is going to talk about finances, but it only goes to the money.
Well,
follow the money.
Absolutely. Yeah. Their mission, their stated mission is regarding agriculture, food and beverage. As you say, this is absolutely related to their climate agenda. And the idea, they say, is to reduce emissions in the world. And their stated aim is we aim to explore new ways to feed an expanding populace, to use technology and innovation to provide nourishment without harming the planet, and to foster public-private partnerships that can help prevent non-communicable diseases. That sounds like a whole word salad going on there to basically say. And the thing is that I sent you the cooked cockroach with which is the WEF advert, which says it's something like, if you don't want to eat this, you're not hungry enough. And which, I mean, kind of sort of speaks for itself, really, doesn't it? It's as a doctor, doesn't this frighten the life out of you, what's going on with our health and them?
Well, I sent you back a photo. I don't know, you probably didn't open it, but there's a cheddar cheese puffs. And I look for the word on the packaging. They say nutritious, sustainable, delicious. And when you see that word sustainable, check the ingredients, because the ingredient for this one is cricket flour. So I'm not sure about you, but I have no intention of having some crickets for breakfast or snack or whatever.
Don't fancy it, oddly enough. But it's all about globalization. As they say, it's about a global food system. And I think, Matt, you already said it, or it might have been you, Sean, but the whole point is it's not for everybody to be put over to the WEF way of things, right? I can no longer call these people elite. I'm afraid I have to call them parasites, because that was a word that somebody suggested to me, and I thought that was eminently preferable than saying elite.
When we say elites, I always say ILL, the ill eats.
Yeah. Oh, ill eats. Oh, well, yeah, and it's certainly very appropriate at this moment in time when we're discussing food. And Kat, in terms of medical health, where does the WEF stand on that?
The problem is their ties to WHO, and this goes back to pandemic treaty, international health regulations. It's going to be a way, and your other guest is going to talk about digital passports, but everything's kind of tied together. They're going to start seeing, are you getting these vaccines, despite the fact that we all know that there is damage happening. They're still pushing for boosters in a lot of places. And now there's this monkeypox vaccine. I don't know if you guys even read about, they're trying to tie MMR vaccine with the COVID-19 antigen. And I believe mumps is going to be the vehicle to transport the COVID-19. So this kind of goes to digital passport. And if you look at the WHO funding, the biggest donors to WHO is Germany. A lot of these initiatives, digital passports, the monkeypox, PCR, they're coming from German companies. And again, it's always about follow that money where it goes. But what WEF and WHO want to do is one health, one world. And, the director Tedros showed us that he doesn't even follow his own panel. He just declares a pandemic. And then once you declare these pandemics, if the pandemic treaty is signed, if the amendments to IHRs are passed, they have vehicles to control how we as countries are going to respond to these different things. And that has to scare everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And you keep saying, as you're so right to, follow the money. So let's follow the money. Alasdair Macleod, thank you for joining us this morning from GoldMoney. Alasdair, money and the World Economic Forum, obviously major push for a cashless society, but we're heading into a really dire situation at this moment in time. Inflation, recession. Tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, you're right on that. I mean, my immediate thoughts, I want to backtrack a little bit because there's something that Matt was saying, which I think is absolutely right. But the way I would put it is that actually Klaus Schwab is rather like Karl Marx. I mean, he's following exactly the same playbook. He wants to rule the world. And but instead of doing what Karl Marx did, who sort of produced a huge, great tome called Das Kapital, to embarrass the professional and business classes about their capitalism, Schwab uses woke capitalists and a conference forum instead of a pseudo-philosophy book. Davos has its useful idiots and fellow travelers, just as Stalin did. And that's actually what we're seeing. And most of these people actually just don't know. They've got no idea about philosophy, about socialism, why socialism fails, why communism fails, and they think that coming together in a huge, great sort of management mass controls all the risks that they see from the general public, from you and me. And that actually is what Klaus Schwab is very cleverly tapped into. And of course, part of the flattery or flummery, if you like, is to be nominated as a partner. You'll be alongside and have access to political leaders, central bankers, and other luminaries. When you look at the UK banks, 3 of them, Barclays, HSBC, and Lloyds, are on the list, as far as I can see, of around about 92 banks, financial settlement agencies, and supranationals like the IMF and so on and so forth. So he ropes in these useful idiots and fellow travelers by supporting fashionable issues. That's actually how he's melding this whole thing together, such as climate change, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence. And then they use names like Attenborough, Thunberg, etc., to position his organization as leading the climate change debate across nations. So he ensures that Davos is the forum for cross-border coordination on a range of fashionable issues. And the unspoken mission is to remove human threats, like the threats that you and I, that we're having now, to his establishment. And he wants to create this world government, like Marx, of course, led by his chairmanship. The only thing he lacks is an Engels, basically, as an enforcer.
Right. Interesting. Let me read you their mission. Building it regarding financial and monetary systems, building more efficient, resilient and equitable financial systems. That sounds very nice, doesn't it? The World Economic Forum is committed to helping financial systems reinforce their contribution to sustainable, keyword, that buzzword, right? Sustainable economic growth and healthy social development. We aim to provide a platform to engineer systems capable of protecting customers and of enabling the investment and saving necessary for future generations to thrive. Sounds lovely. Again, like you say, buzzwords. Cashless society, a major tenet of the World Economic Forum and what they intend to achieve. They promote it endlessly. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, in a sense, what they're doing is they're riding on a trend which is already there. And of course, by taking that trend as their policy, suddenly they're up there, as it were, and they are there to be consulted by anyone who wonders, say, in government or in the central banking system about what actually are the implications of a cashless society. Well, don't worry, we've got the thing under control. And that's, it's a very, very clever mechanism for doing this. I mean, they work with those who are comfortable with the status quo.
Right.
You know, the bureaucrats in government, the bureaucrats in big business, the believers in regulation, those who are frightened by free markets and competition,
Right.
those who are frightened of free expression, those who want to eliminate threats to their own job security and unthinking lifestyles, remainers, monopolists, those who see the WEF as promoting their interests. I mean, I don't know, I've come across people who I would describe as a progressive businessman who always supports the team. He's not a leader. He's an unthinking group thinker. He's a typical useful idiot for the Economic Forum. And that's basically what they're doing. Now, coming back to the finances of the thing, I see two threats or challenges to the World Economic Forum's future. The first is to challenge Western democracy. If it is to progress the young leaders, they must survive the ballot box. It's plainly not in the interests of electorates to do so. And I think that's a real hurdle which they've got to get round. And then there's geopolitics, which I think Sean was mentioning. I mean, China and Russia are building on what Halford Mackinder, who's the founder of geopolitics back in the sort of 1900 or so, he called it the world island, which is the Eurasian continent. With organizations such as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Eurasian Economic Union, and an expanding BRICS, which even Saudi Arabia is looking to join now. They're winning more than half the world population away from America and the dollar's hegemony. China and Russia are not interested in ceding any power to the WEF. I mean, no. Okay, Putin, you know, sort of spoke there some time ago, but he's not interested in that. No. He really isn't. All he is interested in is means of getting the West off his doorstep. So this is
keeping his country sovereign.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is a Western woke vehicle which has to survive something else, and that's this. This is the important thing, which I don't think many people understand. We have a transition from long-term declines in inflation and interest rates to increasing inflation and increasing interest rates. Businesses are going to go bust because they've got used to borrowing at zero rates.
Right.
Rising bond yields mean failing financial asset values. I mean, I kid you not, we have the dynamics for a bear market which would rival the 1930s.
Wow.
The banks are over-leveraged.
Yeah.
I mean, if I look at the asset to equity ratios of the global systemically important banks in the Eurozone, that's more than 20 times. So, you know, all you have is 5% of your assets written off and bang goes your equity. I mean, that's it. The same in Japan, that's roughly 20 times. I mean, the thing that's common is that these two economic areas, if I can put them that way, one's an economic area, the other's a country, have had negative interest rates. What do the banks do when you get negative interest rates? Well, to maintain their profits, they leverage up their balance sheets. And guess what? Basel III says absolutely nothing about the relationship between assets and equity. It concentrates on balance sheet liquidity, which is a completely different thing. So the regulators just don't understand it. The regulators are not interested in the interests of bank shareholders. When banks go bust, it's the shareholders who basically take it. And that's the sort of situation we face. So, I mean, in short, I would say there is a huge risk that we're on the edge of another banking crisis. Now, that changes everything, absolutely everything. So the question then is, can the WEF capitalize on the carnage, or will it be driven into irrelevance? Now, I think that probably irrelevance, because the collapse of the establishment itself, in other words, the core which forms the WEF, will be the end of wokeness. I mean, we have this sort of a completely ridiculous situations, attention paid to things which really do not matter. It's anti-capitalist, the whole thing. But my goodness, when suddenly you've lost your job, your money's gone down the pan and all the rest of it, you suddenly smarten up. This is not, the world, if you like, post-banking crisis is not one which fosters wokeness. So my view is that we've only seen the first round of monetary inflation, because the next one will be to finance bank bailouts, business bailouts, subsidizing mortgages, unemployment benefits, and all the rest of it. Rising interest rates and bond yields inevitably lead to the debasement of fiat currencies. And I think in that scenario, and this is a note of hope in all this,
Good.
the World Economic Forum, I think, will become irrelevant, just as Karl Marx became irrelevant. The danger to this, obviously, if you compare him with Karl Marx, which is absolutely right, is that it took 70 years for the Soviet Union to fall over from after the revolution in 1917.
Right.
You know, I mean, the imposition on us as human beings, removing our right to have opinions, to do what we want, to buy what we want, to work wherever we want, to deploy our skills, to maximize what we do in an economic context.
Yes.
I mean, that is actually what the World Economic Forum, understandably or not understanding, is basically trying to destroy. And that must be prevented.
And traditions as well. I think you'll lose your country's traditions.
Yeah.
Like sovereignty, like I was saying before.
Yeah. That's
Absolutely
the problem with
right.
globalism.
And the economic growth that the world kind of needs to sustain where we're at, I think can only come from sovereign countries based in their traditions. And
yes, that's right. But not only that, it comes basically from the people, not governments. And it's
100%,
governments that have to be rescinded. And of course, as governments are rescinded, I mean, it'll happen partly because China and Russia are going off in a completely different direction.
They certainly
with
are.
a lot of gold.
With a lot of gold, this is true.
And this is definitely your area, which we want to come back to. But let me first of all bring in David Nolan. Thank you. No, please don't apologize. Thank you for waiting so patiently, David. I can see you listening, you know, very hard there about what's going on. David Nolan is the founder of Stop Common Pass. And David, you're here to talk about digital ID. According to the WEF, we're talking about the economic value of a digital identity. What do you think about that?
Well, it's great to be here, Sonia. No pressure after hearing the excellent summations from the other guests regarding the state of play. Because honestly, I could listen to all of that all day. So, thank you very much. And a little bit of feedback regarding what the other guests contributed, just on the back of what Alasdair said. Yes, I believe that recession is imminent and that there is a very strong chance that the World Economic Forum, as a result, will become irrelevant. I think there's a very strong chance of that. What we see going on, tying in the World Economic Forum, I believe this surrounds the needs of the few and not of the many. This is certainly something I perceived when I set up Stop Common Pass back in late 2020. Coming back quickly to what Dr. Kat said regarding bugs, I think it's interesting because this whole kind of proposition, this advocation, this pushing of, you know, eating grasshoppers and different forms of milk from bugs and whatnot, I really don't think, maybe Dr. Kat at some point or some other time can correct me on this, but I do not think that our digestive systems as human beings can actually take that. And I think that could be actually quite harmful to us. So I wonder what's going on with that. And another thing, I think it could have been Sean or one of the other guests said that it was either a Karl Marx statue or it was Vladimir Lenin that Klaus Schwab has a statue of in his office or in his manor of the World Economic Forum. I think that was caught on some video footage from the last couple of years. I think that's interesting. I think it's Vladimir Lenin actually that comes to mind regarding this. Some very interesting things that Sean said about Russia. And again, this is not a pro-Russia stance, folks. I remember Davos Agenda 2021. It was a virtual meeting. The physical meeting was abandoned due to the COVID-19 scamdemic. There's one thing that struck me, what Vladimir Putin said. He pretty much, to paraphrase, he pretty much said that this one world order or this global governance, it's something that's not going to happen. So we're going to have to get over that. He pretty much said that in his own words. I mean, Vladimir Putin is a type of a wild card, a joker card. And I think it's right to assume that he is more vested in the interests of defending his own nation state against the encroachment and the aggression of the West. including NATO. But just to get on to my main blurb, I mean, thank you very much, Sonia and Sean, for having me once again. I mean, this is, I said earlier on regarding, you know, excellent summations by everyone. This is a great meeting of minds that you've both arranged, especially with Matt Gubba, and especially with Matt and the work that he's embarked on with the International Liberty Forum. This is a great example of what Václav Havel and Václav Benda from the former Czechoslovakia called, they called it the parallel police or parallel structuring. So this would be a type of antidote to totalitarianism. And here we are once again, you know, looking to the past to help us in the present, so we can fight for the future. And it's also interesting because I said regarding the formation of Stop Common Pass back in late 2020, this was in response to the World Economic Forum and Rockefeller-backed group called the Commons Project. Again, they kind of styled themselves as being a not-for-profit organization, as the World Economic Forum do. That's not true. They have, I think they have an annual turnover somewhere in the region of $5 billion per year. Klaus Schwab takes about £1 million a year for himself. And the Rockefeller and WEF backed Commons Project, this was their solution to unlocking international travel and everyday life through a form of digital health certification. And this was called Common Pass, hence the name that I picked and I stuck with. Thankfully, they haven't achieved what they wanted to do, but this does not mean that all of this has disappeared. Right. It's quite the opposite. I mean, the World Economic Forum, they are one of the most vocal proponents of digital identity and bringing in the fourth industrial revolution. I would strongly recommend that people get a copy of Klaus Schwab's 2016 book entitled The Fourth Industrial Revolution. It will give you a very strong idea of what's going on now and what is ahead of us. So all this thing regarding digital identity, certification, vaccine passports, this has scaled up massively since 2020. Their influence on international governance and the Davos agenda, it's actually manifesting in real time. For example, in Greece right now, we have a legal parity between someone's physical driver's license and its digital twin. So this is really worrying, and it's consequential because in the years ahead, some bright sparks might get it into their head and kind of go, well, you know, we want to do away with this sort of physical documentation. And what are we left with? We are just left with this digital twin. So that would be an example of the pendulum swinging too far to the right in this context. And if we allow this to happen, it could be too late by the time when we've realized that something has terribly gone wrong. And I don't want to kind of end my blurb here on a very kind of, you know, like negative note, because there is so much of this, you know, in social media right now. It's an absolute tar pit of excessive pessimism, apathy, and I guess you could say like learned helplessness. And what I would say to people,
you're absolutely right.
Yes, what I would say to people is that the future is not set. I believe that there is a bright future ahead for us all, but it's going to take a lot of work. And this is really great work that we're doing. We're pulling the mask back and we are exposing the World Economic Forum for what it is. They are just a bunch of jumped up champagne communists. That's my view of them.
I love the sound of that. Wow. Absolutely right. Right. Listen, I mean, I just want to say, just to add to that, David, obviously their digital identity is major for them. They've come up with numerous reasons why it will help our society. They talk about it will sort of decrease fraud. It will increase productivity. It will help combat counterfeit goods, all manner of things. These are all, as Alasdair talked about before, these are all just great flowery words, really, aren't they?
And the infrastructure is ready to go, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it's continuing to develop at a rapid pace because, you know, they have, I think one of the guests or yourself said this earlier on, they really have bitten off more than they could chew. So the race is on. We have two major checkpoints. I don't want to get like too technical or bogged down with jargon regarding fourth industrial revolution, It's a really expansive subject. But what I want people to take away from my blurb, what I'm saying today, is that we have two major checkpoints coming up: 2024 and massive digital transformation goals by governments internationally. So it's 2024 and 2030, where we're going to see these things becoming a lot more common. We're going to see EID. So we have this already underway with the European Union. I mentioned this before with you guys on Rise, but also the frequented use of digital wallets and the normalization of this. And we're going to see further talk and development of decarbonisation and carbon wallets. So all of this is pointing towards some form of social credit scoring system. And if we want to look at the dark side of digital health passports and whatnot, we only have to look towards East Asia. We only have to look towards China, which is still in development. It's still in rapid development. That is a snapshot of a possible future that we could find ourselves in. The best way that I would describe that is a type of a digital hell, if you want to call it that. And that is what we are trying to avoid right now. We are trying to fight off and push back a form of China light or Chinification of Europe, because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to model and impose this type of crazy technocracy on Western and on European democracies. And as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't wash and it can't wash. We have to do everything that we can to push back against that.
Perfect. Right. Let's open this mic up. Who would like to go first? Anybody have something that they're burning to say?
Yes, I have something.
I have. Oh, sorry. After you.
No, I just wanted to follow up what David was saying. I just flew to Ireland, and we have universal ID now that everyone has to have. And instead of checking my passport, they took digital photo, and that's how they check my identity. So, it's kind of encroaching in all the systems, and it's very slow, insidious. You're not aware, and it's becoming more and more blatant what they're trying to do. And I also find it interesting that all of you always mention socialism, Karl Marx and Lenin, and I grew up in all that. I get it all, and this is exactly how it happens. Now, people say this will pass, it will die. Socialism never survives. Totalitarianism doesn't. I actually kind of question that, because if it truly didn't survive, it wouldn't come back. The only good thing that I have to say about that is that I also feel that people power is much stronger than any ideology, and people do wake up. And I think time is now. People are taking back their power, they're owning their lives, and it's very simple. Just stand in your own truth and reclaim your life. It's really simple. People think it's complicated. It's not.
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, one thing I'd like to pick up on is this idea that the Industrial Revolution is going to be managed by someone. Basically, what we face is the collapse of the current financial and fiat currency system. Yeah. And when that happens, it's not governments that actually have the answer. I mean, they will try and retain control. Of course they will. But this is the important point about the role of their currencies. If their currencies start sliding in terms of their purchasing power, which I think is inevitable, then the Industrial Revolution isn't going to be under the control of the WEF or indeed under the control of governments. It will be triggered by the actions of people getting away from the old system. So, I mean, there are all sorts of issues around this, and I'm sure that governments, bureaucrats, WEF, supranational organizations like the IMF and so on and so forth will all try and stick their oar in and try and manage it somehow. But all that will fail. So, the revolution that we're seeing actually is, I think, as Kat basically saying, it's a people's revolution. And there's just one other thing I would like to say, and I think this sort of debate is extremely useful. I mean, I've learned an awful lot from the other panelists, but what I would really like to see is I would like to see people, ordinary people, challenge, for example, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, to actually disassociate themselves completely from the World Economic Forum,
Yes.
and to ensure that, as you know, one of them is going to end up leading this country's prime minister, to ensure that they have policies which are entirely the business of Britain and not the business of any exterior organization like the WEF. So I want to see them denounce any association with the WEF. And I think that's desperately important. So anyone who looks at this, you know, right into these contenders for prime minister and ask them the basic question, get it out there, get them to deny it.
Now is the time to make demands on them. Well, they still want that role. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Matt, you look like you're ready to say something.
I was going to follow on from that point. Just Rishi Sunak in particular, I find quite problematic, with his father-in-law being the founder of Infosys, who are a company who are keen on and have been rolling out a lot of the social credit system infrastructure. So that connection does concern me somewhat.
Same. Yep. And I think with you know, COVID came along and just inevitably hastened this big step forward into this. Like, you know, it's been an economic war for the last 30 years, technically with China anyway, because China makes everything for the Western world. And I feel that's because they need to bring in the CBDCs, they need to move us. The only thing that I think is going to cure COVID is a brand new financial system. And that's what they're trying to move towards. And I fear that, you know, it's going to be something along the lines of an energy shortage or a food shortage, so that I'll give you a digital currency, but you can only spend it in Tesco. So to people, that's free money. It's food tokens, really, isn't it? But it'll be programmed to only be used in Tesco. And my fear is it comes back to that whole Latin phrase, out of chaos, we create order.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I feel that that's why these conversations are so important, because people need to be made more aware about what's going on. And you know, this is one of the biggest shifts in wealth on this planet in a while, and power, to be honest, if we're talking about neoliberal agenda. And I just feel that we are on the brink of it going either way still. And I don't want to sound pessimistic, but I do worry that it's just like the tentacles, like you were saying before, the octopus is literally spread out.
It is
quite,
that level of influence. It is scary as anything. And obviously the whole idea of a social credit score petrifies the life out of most decent people. Yes, go on, Alasdair.
Can I say something about CBDCs? Because this is an interesting one.
Yeah.
And, I mean, this is all part of the whole thing, let's face it. I mean, you know, whether the World Economic Forum is a mover and shaker in this, or whether it's just, you know, it just sort of picks up on the trend and runs with it, I think is immaterial. But if you look at CBDCs, it is interesting because it cuts out completely the commercial banking network. What you have is, we all have, both as individuals and as businesses, we have accounts with the central bank. Now, to get a CBDC off the ground in an advanced economy, with the bureaucrats looking at how to do it and the checks and balances and the committee meetings and goodness knows what, that is going to take an awful long time. And certainly we're going to be overwhelmed by a banking crisis before that happens. So I think that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is that in America, this is unlikely to get any traction whatsoever. Why? Because the commercial banks basically fund the election expenses of all the representatives and the, you know, I mean, all the politicians basically are funded by, you know, sort of Bank of America, Goldman Sachs and all the rest of it. Now, are these turkeys going to vote for Christmas? I don't think so.
Right.
Anyone who goes for this is going to have his funding cut off. So this isn't going to get through Congress because it does require law. You can't do this on an executive order. So CBDCs, I think, are actually dead.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen one or two examples of it, obviously, but
even with Rishi kind of coming in as,
yeah, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Also, I think the other thing is, I mean, the other issue obviously is cryptocurrencies. Now, cryptocurrencies do not have the legal status to act as money. Now, what this means is that in a criminal case, when it comes to money, if you steal something from me and you pass, money, and you pass that money on to someone else who receives it in good faith, I can't reclaim that money from whoever received it in good faith. If, on the other hand, you steal an artwork from me and you pass that on to someone else, and it might go through 5 or 6 different hands, and I eventually find it, that's my property still. So there is this big difference. Now, cryptocurrencies do not enjoy this criminal protection of money and currency once it goes out of the thief's hands. So, I don't know. I mean, people will know a lot more about the technology of discovering what you can from the blockchain and all the rest of it. But I would say that the blockchain is actually the death of Bitcoin and similar currencies, because they will never work. And the reason they're so popular is that people have recognized that governments print money, they debase their currencies, they dilute its purchasing power. The simple answer is have something which you can call money, which does not get diluted. And obviously the price goes up relative to the currencies being diluted. But it is a phenomenon that only exists so long as fiat currencies exist. And that, I think, is the life of it. So this whole cryptocurrency, CBDC thing, I think is a distraction, actually, and something that we shouldn't worry unduly about.
But doesn't all fiat currency eventually reset back to naught?
Throughout history, yes. And if you look at the hyperinflations, which basically are the destruction or the debauchement of currencies, it's all happened to fiat currencies. Yeah. And it's important to understand actually what the circulating medium is. The only legal form of money from Roman times is gold coin, or silver coin, or even copper coin. But it basically circulates because it is a weight of that precious metal and identified as such. All the rest is credit. When you get a banknote from the Bank of England or from the Fed, that is credit. It is a credit relationship between you, the owner of it, or the possessor of it rather, and the central bank. When you have a bank account, when you have a bank account, that is pure credit. You don't own the money that you think you own, or the currency that you think you own in a bank account. It is a debt obligation from the bank to you, because banks they're not there for our enlightenment or anything. They are dealers in credit. They create credit, and this is the fascinating thing. This is why currencies will eventually go, and I think that we've got the dynamics of seeing this now. I mean, the closest example. The closest example of this in history, I think, is John Law in 1720 France. He printed credit in the form of his livre to buy shares in his Mississippi venture in the market to support the market. And eventually, the whole thing collapsed. What are we doing nowadays? We are supporting financial assets by buying them in, so that the central banks now have stacks of bonds on their balance sheets, which are now going down in value. So central banks actually are technically bankrupt if they were a private sector operation. I mean, I was looking at the Fed. They reckon that there's something like I think the last announcement they had was about let me remember the figure. I think about $340 billion in the hole due to mark to market, and they've only got 50 billion of equity.
Let me just cut in there, if you don't mind, gentlemen. I'm looking. I put out on Twitter, what did other people think about the WEF? I'm in no doubt it's a sinister, oppressive organisation, but I wanted to know what the public think about it. And I have to say, almost 100% of the comments are that people have a problem with it. So I'm just going to give you an overview of some of these comments. Kinoji said, manipulative, dangerous, and unelected. Steve says, pure evil, nobody voted for them, yet they control all governments. DJ Morpheus says, pure evil, all wrapped up in a shiny little package to appeal to those who don't know any better or can't be bothered to research it for themselves. Rachel said, who elected them? And that's the thing, obviously, it's undemocratic completely. Eamon says, I don't think any member of the WEF should be allowed to serve in our government or be its monarch. You cannot serve two masters. Top tips, Malorca says, I think it's the richest people on the planet meeting once a year in Davos to work out how they will spend our taxes to make themselves even richer. Great media campaigns to convince whatever is in our best interests, and people fall for it every time. Of course, we shouldn't forget that amongst the invited people in Davos are journalists as well as investors and financiers of business. So journalists are captured. David Newman says, a truly sinister organization which has completely penetrated and corrupted Western states on a scale the KGB could only have dreamt of. Spectre from James Bond in real life. Question is, though, is Henry Kissinger protege Klaus Schwab a middleman for more powerful people? And one more, and I think this is important. Miscellanea says awareness of WEF is poor. Few MSM followers know of it, yet this massive and massively influential organization has been creeping into all forms of elected government and associated authorities worldwide, as well as within the private sector. It is now marching and will soon ride roughshod. Now, obviously, in the time that we have for our panel this morning, we couldn't begin to go as deep as we'd love to, but the idea was to give a surface, at least an overview of what is taking place. David, I'd like to come to you, David Nolan. You're looking very thoughtful there. Tell us your thoughts at this moment.
But like I said at the start, I think this has been absolutely fantastic, that we've just began scratching the surface here. Like, all of the contributions from the guests have been absolutely fantastic.
Yes,
you know, I will definitely leave this conversation feeling a lot more learned myself, especially from Alasdair. I've seen him a lot, you know, talking about money and finance on other alternative media. It's absolutely fantastic to listen to. And I think in closing, I would just say to people, again, what I said earlier on, try your best, folks, not to get bogged down by this tar pit of disempowerment. And if we have, you know, hundreds and thousands and millions of people internationally saying, what can I do? I don't have the money the WEF have or Klaus Schwab has. It's like we are just kicking ourselves like constantly. You know, it's like, you have power. Take care of 1 meter squared. It doesn't matter if you have little money or no money. I mean, you have the choice over your actions and how you look after yourself and your loved ones going forward into the future. And we need your help also in the pushback. So there really has to be, I think, some significant rewiring of our thoughts in this context, that we are powerless and that we can't do anything, because I feel it really has been the opposite since shots were fired when COVID kicked off in late December 2019 and into early 2020. A lot of people didn't know who and what the World Economic Forum was. They do now, and they're perplexed. They are deeply interested, and they are going to scratch, you know, even further from the surface and go deeper than we are today. Beg your pardon. And just to reaffirm, the future is not set. Don't give in to this thing like we can't do anything. They're going to take over. The UN are going to parachute down because of this new WHO pandemic accord. They're going to forcibly, you know, inoculate us all. I really do not see a future like that. That's not me being naive. Is that if we can visualize a more positive alternative future, we've got to join the dots now. We've got to continue to do the good work that we are doing and realize that there is a hell of a lot more work to come. It's going to be shaky over the coming months and especially like years. But as I said, we've got the checkpoints, 2024 and 2030. Let's get busy and let's create a better future.
Absolutely. And I think it would be completely remiss not to finish with the man who actually inspired this conversation. I'd first of all just like to say thank you all. Like, so enlightening, as I knew it would be, but not just enlightening. I actually feel more positive, because you can get a sense, can't you, that you're up against this mountainous organization that is, as David just said, and we shouldn't feel powerless. And I think the thing about Matt's tweet is I think it suddenly made people realize that we are the power. And that I think is so vitally important. Matt, before I come to you, I'd just like to just quickly go, if I may, just to Kat Lindley, and just have a sort of closing out from Kat, if I may, on our food and health and her thoughts.
Well, humans is it's my job. And I can tell you from my own experience, they did not take away our power. We have given it away. Now it's time for us to actually just claim it back. It's that simple. We just need to take back our power. And the way we do it is with these panels. We inform people and then we give them actionable items to do. And that's our job going forward.
Yeah, thank you, Kat. And Alasdair, I suspect that you have at least one thing more to say. Tell us.
Yeah, I talk too much.
Basically, no, you don't. You know, it's very informative. People who talk too much fill the air with nonsense. That's not what you do. This is not talking too much. This is informative. Please take it away.
You're very kind. I think the one thing I would say from this is, well, I think this is a great thing that you're doing, getting together a panel like this. And what Matt is trying to do, go ahead, get that site set up. I mean, I think that's fantastic. But above all, I want ordinary people around the world to hold their politicians to account, to make sure that they are not giving away their domestic democracy, if you like, to this central organization, which is completely undemocratic and is blatantly Marxist in terms of its philosophy. So that, I think, is the one thing I would say.
Fantastic. And over to Matt Gubba.
Yeah, thank you again, Sonia. I mean, just building on what everyone else has said, really, the WEF can appear to be this, huge, insurmountable enemy that we're all trying to fight, and it could come across as helpless. But I think what we've got to remember, as a couple of the guests, Kat and Alasdair mentioned, we have something that they don't, and that's strength in numbers. We've got people power, haven't we? And the WEF, for all their money and their political influence, they are, comparatively speaking, small in number. And I think if we're all prepared to work together and kind of be united and push back against them, I think we've got every chance that we can do that. And that's what I'm trying to do with the International Liberty Forum. So that's what I'd end it on, really. I think we can beat them, and I think that if we work together, we will beat them.
Wonderful. Everybody, I am so grateful to you for stepping up today. I believe that this is the first of many. And go on, Sean. Yeah,
I've just got one tweet that I'd like to read out that I think pulls it all together. And it's from someone called ABC Birdie. And it says, 2022, it's time to determine who is a globalist shill for the WEF within our own government and get rid of them. No globalists in our government. We are a sovereign nation. Dissolve the UN, squash the private NGO known as the WEF, and let's get back on track.
I love the sound of that. Here, absolutely.
But I think we do need to determine all the globalist shills within government.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody, thank you to our panel, Matt Gubba, David Nolan, Alasdair Macleod and Dr. Kat Lindley. Have a terrific day, you all. Thank you so much for contributing to this vital debate.
Happy birthday, Sonia.
Thank you all. Take good care of yourselves. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you.